All right, good morning, everyone. So, what we're going to be talking about today is something that I think many of us have encountered. I've certainly encountered it in my life, and this is the junction where we perhaps follow the road, the path that parents, family, loved ones expect of us, and we go down this path only to realize that we end up in a place that we don't really want to be in. And I've certainly dealt with it. So just give you a little bit of context and background for this episode. My parents are Nigerian, obviously, as you guys already know. And in my household or in African culture in general, you need to either be a doctor, accountant, a lawyer, or a solicitor, or an engineer of some kind in order to be deemed as a success. And so for me, my dad wanted me to be a doctor, and that led me to take sciences in school, physics, chemistry, biology, all of that good stuff. Although I had an affinity, and despite to the fact that I had an affinity for the arts, music, so on and so forth. And I got to a point when I came back to the UK, probably when I was about 2021, thinking, actually, I'm not sure that I'm cut out to be a doctor because, number one, I couldn't afford the education fees. And yeah, I got to this juncture where it was very, very difficult. Am I going to disappoint my family? Am I going to disappoint my dad in particular? And I think a lot of us walk down this path where we end up in places where we don't necessarily want to be there. We don't necessarily want to do that one thing, and we don't see that being sustainable for us in the future. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here on the podcast today. This episode is also going to be available as a video on YouTube as well, so you can catch that from 12 p.m. today. And to discuss this, I have Michael Glassick here to give some tips on how to navigate this. I'm going to tie this up with some practical stuff from a monetary point of view as well. So, Michael, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Peter. And yeah, it's good to hear a bit about your story from your heritage point. I was nodding along, coming from a mixed race background. My mum being Jamaican and dad kind of English, and I think I've had a similar experience, I suppose, to yourself in terms of that Caribbean heritage and wanting to fit into the top three. I call it like the doctors, the engineers, the lawyers.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Was there a preference in your family for which one they wanted you to
I,
be?
I I think it was around the doctor route, and I was quite thankful that my mum and dad weren't too pushy, and I think I come from almost a second generation kind of immigrant, so my mum and dad worked extremely hard, I would say, to create a stable base for me to pursue my career. So I didn't have to. I could pursue my career from a place of fulfillment, not just security
Hmm.
first and foremost. So there was understandings and pushings towards that doctor route, but it wasn't too strong, thankfully. So I didn't have as hard a time as yourself, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's always one of those ones where I think everyone deals with it, and it's difficult, particularly when you've maybe gone to university and actually acquired that degree and spent a lot of time and often a lot of money acquiring that student
Mm.
debt for those things to then decide, well, actually, this isn't really what I want to do. And you want to do something based on fulfillment, as you've just said there. I mean, how have you navigated that entire journey yourself?
Yeah, I think I went to university, and although I had the understanding of kind of doing what I want to do, I mean, I started off doing an accounting and finance degree, and I was very fortunate for the university I joined. They had the same four core modules, regardless of what business discipline you did. So very quickly, I realised business management, and it's easy with hindsight, was the thing for me, and I swapped degrees because of that fascination of people and people's behaviours. But I still kind of didn't take the sign, I suppose, at the time, and I went into a graduate career. Tried to, I suppose, worked crazy hours and tried to progress very quickly. Got a very good salary at a relatively low age. And then had that changing doors moment, that closing doors moment when you realise, like, you know, do I really want to be doing this for the rest of my life? And it
Hmm.
really caused me to have increased kind of self awareness and look into my interests and strengths at a core, and go into podcasts and find the world of coaching, really, which I'm fortunate to really be pushing down that route going forwards and helping other people have that idea of realization, early in their 20s and 30s rather than waiting till they're older in life.
Mm. I mean, the way they describe, or at least the phrase that is used to describe what we're talking about here, is the core of life crisis. And where I see it most is in people who obviously you got the education side. You do a degree, then you find yourself in, if you're lucky enough to find a job in your chosen degree, you find that actually you don't want to be here. But I also see it quite commonly with the people that I work with who are in a 9 to 5 job, who simply just don't want to be there. And it becomes like a struggle between, I need this job because, well, I need to pay bills, and that feeling of entrapment. I mean, what's your experience, and how do you see that coming from a place where you're trying to navigate, or you are navigating now into coaching and helping people, speaking to people who are encountering this?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing, and you raise a really, really valid point around that entrapment that, it's a, I think you've mentioned this before, it's the golden handcuffs. Like, you have
Yeah.
that good salary, you have that bonus, and it keeps you, you know, you're rather certain misery than the uncertainty of changing to a new career and a new role. And I suppose that the number one thing for me to start off with, quite frankly, is defining your version of success. So not what
Hmm.
society, not what your parents think is successful, right? If you're a doctor, you got the prestige. If you're a lawyer, you got six-figure salaries. I suppose what is your version of success? And there's various kind of tasks and activities you can do to understand that, and that will then start you on that long kind of lifelong journey to pursuing a new career or a new role.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And actually, I had a coaching call with somebody over the weekend, and when I do coaching with people from a financial point of view, I often ask them to fill in some pre-work for me. And when the pre-work comes back, I then dissect what's in there because they have exercises to complete. And on the timeline that I set for this person and asked them to complete, they said financial freedom. And they
Mm,
had an age which was relatively close to where they are right now. And I opened up the session. I said, listen, so this is the thing that stood out to me in your pre-work that you sent back. You said that financial freedom is one of your biggest priorities. What does that mean to you? Because every single time I ask someone this question, it's always very, very different. And I think you've made a really good point in terms of defining what success means to you and not to people who are around you or maybe even close to you, and God forbid, on social media. Because when you think about financial freedom as being something that I think that we all pursue and all, I guess, aspire to, that has different meanings. And the social media meaning of that would lead you to believe that it is having £1 million, a Lamborghini, a private jet, or some stupid, outlandish stuff for you to
yeah.
feel financially secure. And actually, in the real world, that's not what it is. And it's interesting that that's your starting point, because I believe that we need to root ourselves in the things that matter. The money and the monetary figures and some of the other stuff that comes alongside it is simply the accoutrement or the vehicle to make that thing that you root yourself in more meaningful and to help you make it happen. I don't know whether how you view that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, um, I always think about social media as my library. So I've got a couple of books up here. Most of my fiance's because she's far more intelligent than me. But but I always look at social media, say Instagram. I look at it as what is my own personal library. What do I see when I look at a story or a post? Does it give me energy, or does it make me feel worse about my current situation? And I try and cultivate my library of books, but in the social media sense, of inspiring characters and people that help me push on and self develop and learn. And ultimately, are pursuing goals that are in alignment with my goals, my values, my passion. And that allows me, every time I look at social media, rather than kind of making me feel like, oh, they've got the Bugatti, they've got the Rolexes, I haven't got
Hmm.
anything of this. It makes me think there's people out there with similar dreams to me. They're crushing it, they're achieving it, and it gives me that boost that I need sometimes to then continue along my path, because it's a long, windy path. I think you say this with your financial kind of advice and other bits and bobs as well. Like I'm all about long-term development, not short, quick
Hmm.
wins. There's things that can help you get there, but it's a long journey, and I'm committed to this. And I likewise, I like to have individuals who have the same mindset and same values of long-term self-development and long-term commitments. So
Yeah.
that's how I look at social media as well.
Yeah. So for people who may be listening and watching this at the moment, who are in this, quarter of life crisis. They might be in a 9 to 5 job, realizing I don't want to do this. I can't do this anymore. I want to change. I want to do something that is going to be fulfilling to me. What would be your top tips to to help them and make that transition? Really.
Definitely, definitely. So there's three main tips, I suppose. There's of course, it's a long-term process and long-term program and journey you go down. But the three core themes, one is what we discussed already. So defining your version of success. Is it financial freedom? If it is, what is it about financial freedom for you? Is it just a case you want financial freedom to then pursue the career or job you want to do now? Okay,
Hmm.
fair enough. Is there something we can do to have that career or job now that also is rewarding financially, so we can get to that place quicker and live in that place of fulfillment in a much shorter timescale. So
Hmm.
there's various activities around self-awareness around your values, your passion. I think through doing that, I've clearly learned that mine is to wake up every day with a sole focus to inspire people to do what inspires them. And for
Hmm.
me, I just think when I'm on my deathbed, kind of God willing, and I look back and I think the ripple effect, the amount of people I can help change their path, how much more passionate and respectful and fair the world will be if you could have more people doing jobs they actually enjoy. We've all
Hmm.
met people, receptionists or other roles, and you think they don't enjoy their job. You can tell they don't enjoy their job. And if you can help define your success and get to that place, at least that kind of that compass, that end goal, that's a really good starting point to kind of continue your life forward with. So I would say that's my first core concept. Then my
Hmm.
second one, funny enough, is around accountability, which I have the pleasure of being in an accountability group with yourself and some other real kind of key dream makers. And it's finding people that energize you. When I'm in the room and I meet yourselves and others and I kind of network, I talk about my dreams and they talk about theirs, and we can see the path and the alignment that we're going to. Now, we've all had that friend that you have this dream, you have this goal that you want to do since you're a child, but perhaps you suppressed it. You've done what society tells you to do, earn that Rolex, get that Bugatti.
Hmm.
Um, and they turn around to you and you say, I've got this idea. I think I want to do this. I want to go into coaching. I want to help others. And they go, because I don't enjoy my role. And they say, Michael, no one enjoys their job. What are you on about? Just keep going. Just stick, quit your teeth and carry
That's the
on.
worst. That is the worst thing. That is the worst thing. And I think you're right. I think accountability and having a tribe and this is the thing, right? So this is my firm belief. I Over the past maybe 2 3 years, I've met a lot of people, and everyone has an ambition. Everyone now on social media wants to drive at their own specific thing. But you're right. If you're trying to do something that is a little left of center, a little bit out there, if you don't have people who kind of think the same way, they're not going to see your perspective. They're not going to understand what you're trying to do. And so having a circle, having a tribe of people that you can bounce things off, that see the world and understand that actually we want to do something different. That's really, really important. And I think the most important thing is that you don't necessarily always have to have people who want to do exactly the same thing. As long as you can find a tribe or group of people that are driven, they are willing to put themselves out there, you energize each other. And even more so if there are people with different goals, different aspirations in different areas, like that group community that you end up getting ends up growing because you can not only just inspire people, but you might actually see that there's a cross section of skills and knowledge that you can benefit from as well. And accountability is so important, really, really important.
Yeah, no, there's cliche sayings like your network is your net worth and other bits like that. But I mean, I truthfully believe in them. And I think I completely agree. There might be spheres and other goals that might not be relevant to you now. But who knows if you build that lifelong relationship with people in 5 years, 10 years, who knows how you can kind of cross section and help each other out to,
Mm.
in the future. And I think that accountability piece, I would really recommend that to anyone. Could be simple as having an accountability partner that you kind of touch base once a week and say, these are my goals for the week. This is what I'm going to try and do going forward. And there's loads of tools and books. Like there's a really good book called Make Time that says, set your daily highlight. So, at the beginning of every day, what's the one thing I want to do today? You might share that with your partner, your accountability partner. And at the end of the day, you just review how you got on. And you think, if you did that for 365 days, that habit, doing one small thing, my goodness, what a year it could be if you do that one habit every single day. So, so I suppose in building on that, even more practicality. So that's like a good, thing about the partner, accountability partner. But when I thought about my journey and getting into the coaching space, we're in the digital age. There's great tools like LinkedIn where I can find other people, other coaches who are 3 years, 5 years ahead of me in the journey, and I can reach out to them and ask what their experience is. How did they find it transitioning into that career? What are some of the things they would do differently if they had their time again? And I quite like that 3 to 5 year period because if you have someone who's 10 years, who's a master, who's an expert,
Hmm.
sometimes they're harder to relate to. So I think that's also quite a key tangible tip. If you can find someone, you define your success, you start to understand what some of the roles, the industries that I want to get into, you can start talking to those people to say, what is the reality of this job? Everybody's watched Suits and seen Harvey Specter and thought, I want to be a
Hmm.
lawyer. And then you talk to a real lawyer and you realise that's 5% of the job, and it's
Yeah.
reading papers, it's doing research, and then you think, okay, maybe the Suits lifestyle is not for me. But I think that's also another good one on that network.
Yeah, I would agree. Suits is a great show, by the way. It's one of my
It's
favorite
a
ones.
great
What an
show.
absolute great show. They need to continue that. They need to continue that. Yeah, but for sure. I mean, I think you know this is one that I hope people will benefit from because I think through COVID, cost of living crisis, um, there was this great resignation where people are like, actually, you know what, I don't want to do this. And I think when you go through something like COVID, you definitely realign your priorities and you think, well, actually, this really does not work for me. And so if you are listening to this, I want to kind of like the podcast is about practical things that you can just go off, you can consider, go and research, go and plug into your life on a day-to-day basis and help you move forward. But as I've already mentioned, sort of part way through this, I meet a lot of people who are in this position right now who are in a 9 to 5. And I think when you feel the sense of you're trapped, it leads to so many other things. And I'm be interested to hear your thoughts on this. The amount of people that I've spoken to who hate their jobs, who are depressed, who have anxiety about going to work on a Monday morning. I mean, in the past it feels like it's just been one of those things. I'll just get on with it. This is just get on with it. But now I think we're definitely more um, open to discussing and talking about the fact that actually I feel depressed on the Monday morning. I don't want to be here. It's having an impact on my mental health. Do you see that a lot in the people that you interact with?
Yeah, no, I think what you said about the Great Resignation kind of speaks really true to me. I think, and the people I see, because it's given some people that it gave them that opportunity. It was like a circuit breaker. They just carried
Hmm.
on with life. I know it's rubbish. I just keep going on, just head down, keep going, keep going. And then COVID stopped. Various industries, hospitality and others, stopped them. Said that's it, nothing's happening, and it gave people that time to self-reflect and ponder. Do I want to do this? What else is there more to life than just kind of cracking on and doing these things? And it just makes me think about others. The tags we put to millennials and say, they're the lazy generation. They don't want to
Yeah,
do X, Y, Z. They don't work hard. Well,
yeah,
I have a bias, I must admit, but I say we're the fulfilling generation. We're the generation that pursue fulfillment first, and other things that come a second. And I think there's hopefully all I would stress to people is I know it's hard, and you aren't the only one out there. And I swear to you, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are in a similar situation who are really struggling with the jobs they're in and not knowing what kind of way to turn. And I just implore you to take small, actionable steps because you can't change these things in a day, a week, even a month sometimes. And that will kind of come on to my third and final tip in a minute. You need to take small steps. Is it simply just looking at a CV? Is it talking to a friend? Is it kind of having a look on LinkedIn just for 5 people who might be in a role that interests you? And just do it one small, like my daily habit, my daily highlight, sorry, one small step every day, And within a week, within a month, you can look back and think, right, okay, I've contacted 3 people. I've had a conversation and they know a job that might be of interest to me. They've told me about the careers and the educational requirements, you know. So for me, it's just to implore you, it is hard. Please don't feel overwhelmed. And please just take small steps and have that moment of self awareness and self reflection. Because if anything's urgent in this world, it is you. You are
Hmm.
urgent and your life matters. So make the most of it.
Yeah. And what's your final tip? What's your tip number three for people?
Yeah, so I say all this lovely stuff, and I can maybe see people thinking, yeah, Michael, that sounds great. You've got your
Hmm.
success, you've got the self awareness. Yeah, it sounds great, mate. But how do I actually transition? Like, how do I move
Yeah.
over to
Yeah.
another role? And I come from a vast experience of project management, so I have my fair bit of risk averse in me when I
Hmm.
make decisions. And I think my final tip is around that transition, and it's taking a calculated risk. So I don't
Mm.
want people to take the message of, right, that's great, Michael. I know what I want to do. I know I'm trapped. I'm quitting my job tomorrow. I got my resignation. I'm sending my email.
Yeah.
It's take a calculated risk. So, okay, what do I need to do? What are the essential bills and things I need to pay? And I know you kind of harp on about this, and I think it's so good in terms of financial sense around emergency funds. I think this
Hmm.
is amazing. This is one of the biggest things I kind of preach to people when they're at that period of transition. And is it 3 months, 6 months, whatever feels relevant to you? Some people might be more risk averse and might want to work towards a year. Some might be more 3 months because of their skill set. They can find a job quickly. But once you have that backing behind you, you can then go into other investments. Or in my sense, once you have that backing behind you, you can then take that leap to another career. And even the career you leap into, is it for my world in terms of coaching? Do you become a self-employed coach? A one-man band. You've got there's no ceiling to the income and to the positives, but you take on a lot of risk. Or
Hmm.
do you become an associate coach? So for 2 or 3 days a week, you're part of a wider organization. You've got a salary that's in the bank, guaranteed 10, 15K. And then the other 2, 3 days a week, you're self-employed and you start to build your brand and build your shit. And there will be little parts of that I hope people can take for their own individual careers and their aspirations to make a small calculated risk. Simple things from going full time, you might go part time. And then for the other 2 days, that's what you do in that other career. And then when you work it up, you gain the confidence, this is a thing for me. You quit that full time job, which you moved to initially part time, and you go full time into your role and you go smashing forwards and crack on. So yes, I have the airy fairy stuff around the kind of success and the self reflection, but equally, there's really quick, tangible steps you can take to move to that place.
I love that because that's really, really practical and it's actually quite important. And when I was in corporate world, when I was in Canary Wharf, we used to use this analogy because we were selling like this really groundbreaking investment product, and in the business we use this analogy like when you start off a business, you're on your bike. So you're pedaling furiously, right? And as you try to grow, what you have to do is you have to jump off your bike into a car without actually stopping and getting off the bike. So what you're
Hmm.
doing is you're trying to number one, you need to make sure you have enough runway so that you can get up to speed, get steady, and actually work out how you're going to make that transition. And I think that emergency fund really is that mechanism for you to go from the bike to the car being more fulfillment in what you actually want to do long term. If I were to put it into analogy, that would be an analogy that I would put it into. But crucially, what I do want to stress here is that, you know, if I think about my own personal experience and my own personal journey over the last 2 to 3 years, an emergency fund has been invaluable to making all of this happen. None of this would have happened if I didn't have an emergency fund. And we harp on about this so much that it can be a little boring sometimes, and it could be like, yeah, Pete, we know, but believe me, it's really, really important for you to think practically, to think pragmatically. And, ironically, I have my book coming out this month, and I spend a lot of time in the book talking about how you actually go about building an emergency fund, the purpose of an emergency fund. Because with everything that's happened, I started this podcast, the YouTube channel, literally in COVID, with my emergency fund giving me enough runway to be able to be like, I'm going to give this the full beans. To be here 3 years later to have a book coming out is amazing. If I did not have that emergency fund, I would have been forced to go back into a 9 to 5. I would not be here. And so I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this, take a moment. Time is of the essence. You don't have a minute more to waste. You really don't. You have to think about it pragmatically. You have to think about it for, look, if you only have a finite amount of time, how soon do you want to make tangible, meaningful change? And the changes are difficult. They are. They are difficult. They are going to test you. They're going to challenge you. But small steps. Small steps lead up to bigger things. And even if you have a realization from this episode of, okay, I need to take a pause, I need to think about this properly, then I think we would have served ourselves. But I think it's really, really important. Don't waste any more time. Really think about what those practical steps are. Reach out to someone like Michael to actually guide you. And this brings us on to how do people actually find you, Michael, if they wanted to reach out on social media or other means?
Yeah, so if you go Michael Classic Coaching on Google, you'll find my website, michaelclassiccoaching.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Instagram, simply Michael Classic Coaching, all one word. So it'd be a pleasure to kind of help support others, and it kind of help you on that journey of transition to pursuing a career that's both fulfilling and rewarding for you.
Cheers, Michael. And so, look, guys, if you have listened to this and you're watching this on YouTube, I appreciate every single one of you. This podcast, again, this year is going to try and branch out to talk about things that intersect with money, because it isn't just all about the investing. It is obviously a great and really important step, but there's so much more that you need to have in the background as your foundation to get there. And things like mental health, things like, how you actually go about surviving work if you are in a 9 to 5 that you absolutely hate. And I've been there. It's horrible. It's horrible. Spending years feeling unfulfilled, feeling as though you're wasting your time, feeling as though your time could be an end at a performance review. That's how I used to feel in corporate world. I would do so well, but you become a victim of your own success. Where if I bring in £15 million in sales, well, guess what? That's 100% target, 110% of my target. I know for a fact that my target is going up by 20% the following year. So, this is corporate structures. This is the corporate rat race, right? And being able to transfer or transition into something that you care about, that will be your passion, is not easy to do. A lot of people try this, a lot of people fail, but that doesn't mean that you will fail. And so these practical tips are really, really important. Reach out to Michael, reach out to myself. Like I said, we have a peer circle, which is an accountability group. It's full of like-minded people who want to work towards something that is going to be fulfilling for them. And we make sure that we have a chat every single week. We set goals and we meet up once a month. If you want to join that, there'll be a link in the show notes. I'll also leave links to Michael in the show notes as well. But as always, thank you so much for listening. Remember, money is a tool, life is for living. We'll catch you next Monday.